The use cases are very similar to the use cases where people are going to the edge for. E-commerce is a big one, A/B testing, user profiles, anything really that is global. It's funny because database people, we think a lot more in terms of characteristics than in terms of use cases. People who met me in the past 10 years know me as a database person, but back then, had you invited me to join a database company, my reaction would have been no.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to Jamstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss modern web development with maintainers, founders, and developers. Jamstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at Jamstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of Jamstack Radio. On the line, we got Glauber Costa. Glauber, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to finally connect on a podcast. We had met at Jamstack Conf last year.
Yes.
And congratulations on all the progress on ChiselStrike, which we'll talk about in a moment. But wanted to touch base on your background and how you got here.
Absolutely. I've been doing open source for essentially my whole life, which is a lot of years. I started with the Linux kernel. So there was this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Linux was this thing that was becoming huge, right? Nobody really believed in open source. It was a very different world back then. Like we had to prove that this is a model that could work. I was just in college and I took an interest. I always liked performance and low-level systems. I was never much of a web person. I tried a bit and was never my thing. And I love the fact that Linux was open source, was the whole operating system, and I can just go and change it. And then I started contributing to it and spent a decade doing it. I eventually started working for Red Hat, and then I worked in virtualization, in the Zen hypervisor, and the KVM hypervisor for folks who are familiar with. Made obviously most of my, if not most, a very large part of my connections today, including my co-founder, Pekka. Pekka, at the time, he was the maintainer of the memory management subsystem for Linux. I was trying to get some of my work through him. And then we developed this kind of love and hate relationship. We've been friends since then, but he was a tough guy, tough on accepting my contributions, of course, for a reason. Linux is a very high standard project. So I've done this for, as I said, around a decade. In that time frame, I wasn't very interested in startups. My thing was really just hey, open source and hacking on Linux. That's it. That's the life. And when I was becoming a bit interested in startups, I was growing up, and figure it's good to be innovating and doing new stuff. One great friend that I had in the community, in the Linux community, was starting a startup, and that was the creator of the KVM hypervisor, with whom I worked for a long time. I joined his startup in around 2013, if I'm not mistaken, 12 or 13, something like that. And the startup was doing something called a unikernel, which is essentially a specialized kernel. So we wrote our own kernel in C++ at the time that can only run a single application. And with that, hopefully you get better performance. You don't have transitions between user space and kernel space. The product didn't work very well. Technically it did, but we found no market for it. I think it was just the wrong time. Things like Firecracker, for example, didn't exist. Everything was a lot heavier. So you would boot this thing on EC2. EC2 would take 5 minutes to boot a machine, and then your kernel takes 300 milliseconds to boot. It was incredible compared to Linux, but you just reduce your boot time from 6 minutes to 5 minutes and 300 milliseconds, not that impressive. So, it didn't work for a variety of reasons, and we pivoted. The company pivoted into a database company. And it's funny because people who met me in the past 10 years know me as a database person, but back then, had you invited me to join a database company, my reaction would have been no. Please no. That's the last thing I want.
Why is that?
It just didn't feel to me databases were so well established, my thinking was, and it felt so arcane to me. And everybody has this idea of oh, what a stupid idea. And it's a stupid idea that everybody has, writing a database. Now I'm writing my third database. I guess I grew stupider. But I landed in that. So that wasn't my intention. I was really interested in operating systems. But it also, part of that is that I started realizing that was becoming harder and harder to build the business with operating systems, because talk about databases being this platform, very ossified thing. operating system were becoming even more. So I had a job at Linux, but if you think about business, it was becoming a harder and harder thing to do. Like Red Hat was very dominant, and etc. So I said, you know what, I'm here. Why not? Might as well try. And the database was Scylla. For those in the audience that might have heard of it, it was a reimplementation of Apache Cassandra in C++, focused on very high performance and delivering 10 times the throughput with low latency. Database still there, still rocking, doing tremendously well, last I've heard. But it kept this ethos that I always liked about performance, speed, latency, high throughput, and I ended up staying in the company for 8 years. And it was a great opportunity. We wrote the whole thing from scratch. I got involved in the business side of things, and I left around the time COVID started. Then I spent a year at Datadog. At the time, it's something that affected all of us. So for a variety of reasons, I think it was better. And my intention was to spend at least 4 years at Datadog and say, hey, let me take a break from startups and et cetera, and see how the world is in the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
And I want to say that Datadog is a fantastic company. Every time I have a friend that comes to ask me, hey, I'm getting an offer from Datadog. What do you think? I said, just go for it. It's a fantastic company. But I also realized that I'm a builder. I like to be building stuff, and like working for a large company is very, very challenging in many aspects. And at the time, we had the opportunity to start ChiselStrike, and then we did. So I ended up spending just a year at Datadog, and now we're here with ChiselStrike, Becca and I.
Yeah, fascinating. I didn't realize all your background until you dropped your bio in our show notes, but I feel like I just took a tour through your your historical record. But I'm curious, what got you to leave Datadog and start ChiselStrike?
Yeah, so it was a variety of things, Richard. So first of all, as I just mentioned, as far as big companies go, Datadog was an incredibly pleasant place. But I always had the idea, my idea was, after some 4 years at Datadog, maybe it will be the time for me to start my own company. I always wanted to be a founder. Not always, as I mentioned in the beginning. In the very beginning of my career, was just open source. But since I got interested, I like to do all sorts of things. Right? So at Scylla, I was doing engineering, I was doing marketing, I was doing sales. Not as a salesperson, but helping those folks. So I like those environments in which you're doing everything. Founder is pretty much the definition of that. And then we had the opportunity. We had a VC firm with whom we were talking to, just out of friendly relationships. As you well know, VCs love to get in touch and get to know you, etc. Every time you do something interesting, just to expand their network. And we clicked with one VC in particular. We've been chatting with him for months, and then one day, Becca and I had this idea. Well, why don't we try this? We talk to him essentially out of curiosity. Let's see what comes out of it. And he was very excited, ready to write the check. So essentially, we had a check. And as I said, Datadog was great, but I love being a builder. It was tough. It was really tough because for people who have done both startups and big companies, the big advantage of big companies, right? Just liquid.
Yeah. I just left a big company and was very comfortable for the 4 years and 8 months I was there.
Yeah. So that's what I was shooting for. Hey, 4 or 5 years, I'll use this liquidity to build my future. Maybe I'm just crazy. That's the story. But we had the opportunity. We had an idea that we believed in. We felt at the time was right, and then we just jump ship.
Cool. And then I guess we could go right into what is ChiselStrike? What are you solving?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, just for the benefit of your audience, I guess, of what we were solving and what we're solving now, because we also had a little bit of a detour in the way. We don't call it necessarily a pivot, especially in comparison with what I had before. I start with an operating system and land with a NoSQL petabyte scale database. But our idea initially with ChiselStrike was that the main thesis that we had is that you have people like yourself, they're front-end developers, that are more and more in charge of the database decisions for your companies and for your projects and et cetera, versus an old world in which databases are the domain of the anointed, right? So we started trying to understand it, and we did not know that fully at the time. What we learned as we started doing our research, but many other companies were picking up on that. which in the beginning was like, oh, it's a bit scary because it's competition, but you also feel validated that like I'm hitting on an idea that's true. So things that we started as we've done our research, that we started to notice that would be important for databases to do in this new era was like play very well with the edge, and serve front-end developers very well. So what we've done with ChiselStrike is that we got SQLite, right? So and why SQLite? Because SQLite is a database that to us felt like perfect for the edge. And then it provides you with like unmatched developer experience because you can do just everything locally on your laptop, and etc. And then we decided to add a Dino runtime to that and allow you to execute TypeScript functions in the database itself. So, the idea was pretty simple. And at some point we said, we're going to figure out a way to put SQLite at the edge. And what do you need to do to put SQLite at the edge? You need to essentially make sure that the data comes from somewhere to that instance. But once it does, then you're behaving like you would do it locally. So now you have a super fast database that it doesn't feel like you as a front-end developer is writing code to a database. You can just write TypeScript code, and then we have a compiler that compiles just to queries and so on and so forth. And the idea there was like reduce friction, and you're a front-end developer, you don't have to learn SQL and things like that. But then, like the mantra of startups is like talk to your audience, right? Just and we've done it. We've done a bunch of things around SQLite at the time, but it wasn't like our main focus. Our main focus was like, let's figure out the APIs first. Let's figure out like this part about the data and code merging, however you want to call it. And then later, and we have prototypes, but then later we productize the thing that makes SQLite able to operate in a distributed environment. So talking a lot to our users, we realized a bunch of things. First of them is that as it turns out, and again, you tell me, you're front-end developer. Front-end developers are not as scared of SQL as we thought. Most of them actually, you may be scared of databases, and we have this tendency of thinking databases and SQL are interchangeable, but they're not. So what we realized is that people were not only okay with SQL, they kept asking us, "Oh, great abstraction, but can I do SQL? Right? Just can I go one layer below and do SQL?" And also, the thing about code complicated a lot of people's mind because it felt like code. So the question that we got asked all the time: so how do we deploy those on Netlify? I said, well, we don't, because this is database code. So you deploy this on us, and then you call this on a REST API. But it's code, right? It's so the boundaries were not that clear. And every time we would talk to anybody, people would ask us a lot more questions. We will feel a lot more interest in the SQLite for it. And then we figure, hey, then maybe that's where the things are. And then we reoriented the company a little bit towards that.
Okay, yeah, and from just hitting in the landing page, it says SQLite on the edge.
That's what it is.
And I automatically already got it. And I think I saw your previous landing page quite a few months ago. And I totally understand my use case for the stuff, and you pigeonholed me correctly. Yeah, front-end developer. Mm-hmm. I can be dangerous in SQL, but I don't want to go host my own databases and create droplets and do all that stuff.
Yeah,
I just want to interact with the database, and I think that's what we got from all these like NoSQL solutions that were hosted. But I felt like a lot of those we end up hitting like we hit it like a ceiling, because you don't have as much control when you have to go dig in and get in deeper. So all the stuff you mentioned, like Deno and SQLite being like, no, I'm thinking of MySQL, but SQLite is also similar. It's like a low friction.
Mm-hmm. Well, SQLite is the no friction thing because the configuration is 0, right?
Yes.
It's essentially a B tree in a file, right? And that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's like it ships with. I think it might still ship with Rails out of the box when you do Rails new and a couple other frameworks.
Now our product is a little bit more complex than that, of course, right? So what we offer is the ability for you to develop in the environments that support it. For example, Cloudflare will not. For those who know Cloudflare, for obvious reasons, local development. So you can develop everything locally with SQLite. But then, you're not going to be using the database as you normally use in production, like inside your application. Because when you're doing a serverless function, when you're doing an edge function, there is First of all, the function takes a couple of milliseconds. It's short-lived. Usually, those pieces of infrastructure, they don't have local storage. You cannot even open TCP connection, so it's very hard to connect like traditional databases. So what our product allows, and our product, by the way, is called ChiselStrike Turso or just Turso, and we'll talk about the name later. Let's just not to detour the explanation, but the idea is that you now, because SQLite is so light, we can very easily and cost effectively replicate this to up to 26 regions. And the CLI, you have a CLI. By the way, Turso just opened public beta a couple of days ago. So you can go to the website and check it out. You're essentially going to have a CLI. The CLI allows you to create a database and then create as many replicas as you want. During the public beta, the number of replicas is limited. But that's the idea. Very cheaply, very easily, you create those replicas all over the world. And then you connect over HTTP to the closest replica, right? So locally, you develop everything using SQLite. And now you have a database that is based on SQLite that runs the same code. So you don't have to do, you could do this with Postgres. You can do something like, I'm going to do Postgres for production and SQLite for development. But people who have tried to do this, they always have the abstraction layers that always break. So the code that you run in production is not exactly the same that you're running in testing. And what that allows you to do is essentially this, like the production database you access through HTTP from your edge functions, from your serverless functions. And again, it's super lean, extremely replicated. You can replicate anywhere and be close to your users, which is what a lot of people in the edge want to do.
That's excellent. Yeah, this is exciting too as well. And I remember I used to work at Netlify early days, and we did a lot of real creative stuff with some of these like SQLite databases to like go like store logs, just like the historic log data one-off, put it in a place. And actually, at one time, it was all GitHub gist back in the day. But I love that abstraction, which is GitHub gist to start up a prototype. But this is now one step above that. And I think one thing I want to point out too as well is like it's a simple abstraction, and I know there's more complication behind that, and there's more where you can go. Mm-hmm. But I think that onboard ramp is what's really exciting about what you're doing. Because if I can get this started pretty quickly, and then if I need to dig deeper or expand the operation of what I'm doing, like I want to have that at my fingertips.
Yeah. And again, we need to have our own clients because, again, SQLite is this local thing. And we wouldn't have the need for the clients if it wasn't a serverless environment. But serverless environments is all HTTP, right? So you have to translate that. So the clients essentially allow you to write SQLite SQL code that is either proxy to the local file or to HTTP. So if your environment variable says database URL, says file something, there you go, you write into a file. If your environment variable says HTTPS, whatever, and the address you got from the database, you deploy into production. Simple as that. And just that's the gist. So you start very simple. We're not going for a product, by the way, that is shooting for those are the 100 features that you want from a database. There are databases that serve that use case very well. We're going for this thing that, hey, this is extremely simple, works in your development, works in your CI, by the way. Imagine how fast your CI is if you're just passing local files instead of setting Docker images with databases and all that. And then when you go to production, it's just the same experience. And now you can replicate this to like all over the world if you want with a couple of API calls. That's what we're shooting for, right?
Excellent. And I wanted to take a step back because you had mentioned Turso. Mm-hmm. So the company is ChiselStrike. The product itself right now is Turso. Mm-hmm. What's the plan there? Do you plan to have multiple products?
Well, every company at some point has multiple products, right? So just I don't know, and I'm as a CEO, some decisions we have to make decisively and as fast as we can, and some decisions I think we just need to wait and see. And I want to see how the market feels about it. The company, again, with the company Scylla, just as an example, the company name was Claudio Systems. And then after the pivot, we became both the database and the company became Scylla. So I see the value of doing this. Some other companies don't do it. I have, for example, Confluent that has Apache Kafka. Yeah. So there is a mix out there. And I think a name change comes when there is confusion. Right. So just it's too early for me to tell. I don't want, I actually like the ChiselStrike name. I love it, and we have the logo right here. You can't see, right? Turso just got this new mascot on the website. So I don't know. Like if there's no confusion, then we keep different. If there is confusion, we change one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And can we talk about more specific use cases of where you would go and reach for Terso?
Yeah, so the use cases are very similar to the use cases where people are going to the edge for. And by the way, if you have any suggestions to that list, I mean, we're always looking for people deploying on the edge and etc. But those are things like e-commerce is a big one, because especially if you have a global presence, you want your data to live as close to your users. A/B testing, personalization, user profiles, anything really that is global. It's funny because database people, as I eventually became, we think a lot more in terms of characteristics than in terms of use cases. So the characteristics of this thing are like lots of reads, not a lot of writes, right? Because SQLite is very limited in the amount of writes you can do. So a lot of reads, low latency from global locations, essentially. So everything that serves that. And of course, when communicate that, you do need the use cases, and those are some very common use cases that people are moving to the edge for other reasons. Like, so you want your compute to the edge for those use cases. But then what you end up doing today is that your data stays behind, right? And what Turso wants to enable is that your data can now come with you, right, at an affordable price.
Yeah, so Glauber, I wanted to actually ask about the name Terso.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the story behind that? Because I don't think it's actually a real word.
It is a real word. And,
it is? Okay.
Just not in English. That's the thing. And just my co-founder, Pekka, is Finnish. It's super funny because usually products have a code name. And then after that, you figure out a good name for the product. And in the Finnish mythology, there is a monster called Iku Turso. And Iko, as far as I understand, means it's just a Finnish word that means eternal. So it's like the eternal Turso, and it's like a monster. And I've even heard that Cthulhu was inspired by it, and some maybe true or false, I don't know. Pekka told me that there are parallels between that and the Leviathan. So it's just a mythological creature. But even funnier is that he codenamed the internal development version this, but it wasn't even because of the monster. It was because of a Finnish beer that is called Iku Turso, an IPA as far as I can tell. So he just, we needed a code name. We needed to create a Git repository. So, all right, so he created Iku Turso. And then we were like thinking about names in the meantime. So the name that we were going for was Chisel Edge, essentially like ChiselStrike on the edge. But the more we talk to people, I mean, Turso sounded like a great name. Iku Turso, and I'm trying my best on the Finnish pronunciation.
You got me.
Yeah, Iku Turso is a big word, and we didn't want to. So Iku sounds Japanese, and it's hard to get a domain. So we just went for Turso. Then Iku became the name of our mascot, like Iku the Turso, that you can see on the website now. Yeah, that's the story. So at the end of the day, it's just like it sounded great. People loved it. It was a great backstory, and all the names that we could come up with, they all felt very lazy. It was just like edge something, blah blah blah, and then we went for Turso, right?
Excellent. Yeah, I love a good origin story, and also I love Finnish too as well. Apparently, excellent. So now that Turso's live, what's next? What are the plans?
Oh yeah, Turso is live in public beta now. So as I mentioned, you can go, you can play with the product. Now we're very focused on making this GA. That's our next iteration, and essentially productizing, allowing people to. We already got some interesting things deployed in the platform, so allow people to essentially swipe their credit cards and become users. So it's a lot of work on reliability, stability, and then see where it goes.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to trying it out. Funny enough, of course, Netlify is listed on the homepage. They're a great user. They would be a great user for this, and it seems like they already are. But yeah, you're part of the Jamstack Fund as well. So we've had a few of the companies in the Jamstack Fund come chat with us. So congratulations on that. And onwards and upwards.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, so I do want to transition us to picks. So these are jam picks, things that we're jamming on, things that are keeping us up at night, or maybe things that are just keeping us excited about what we're working on. So it could be music, food, etc. If you don't mind, I'll go first. I actually have a tech pick, and it's more of a broader pick. Every year I try to do like a long series of go learn something. Actually, a couple of years ago, I was learning about databases back in 2020. because like it seemed like an influx of a ton of new database tools to make it easier for me to write code and ship production stuff. But right now, for the month of March, so by the time you hear this, I'll be completed the 30 days of AI. Specifically, I've been seeing all these AI products and all these projects built on OpenAI and etc. And I've had the itch of like, oh, I want to try it out. Let me see if I can embed this in my product. Like, we'll get there, but I just wanted to learn more about the concept of AI because I was at GitHub when they launched Copilot. I got to see that get launched and have good understanding of how that works because I got to see the sort of how the sausage is made. And so I'm just going through all open source AI projects. So what I can find free and public available on GitHub, and just going through the code. And I'm just writing a blog post and just give a quick description, try to keep it like 500 words around what the product does, and then walk through the code of how it actually connects to the models.
There's no better way to learn, right? Just to do it and write about it. Writing is great. I think lots of people are very good at like learning by doing, but the writing about it, I love it because it crystallizes the ideas in your head.
Yeah, 100%. Like OpenAI, ChatGPT, those models that OpenAI has, like the documentation is kind of dense, and there's no search in it, so it's really hard to find the thing I'm looking for in there. So what's been nice is like look at someone else who's built a thing, and then go to the docs to like support understanding what they built. So it's been a great mental model for me to understand. Okay, this is how you choose the models. This is how you update the sort of frequency, or what I forgot to call the term of deterministic level. And it's all stuff I understand, but like try to implement that and build that myself. I love reading other people's code to do that.
It is a wild world out there with AI.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know if we're going to catch up to ourselves and everyone figures out, oh, it turns out it's just the one person, one puppet master, which I guess maybe Microsoft is driving all this.
It could be. Yeah, it could be.
But I do want to point out that all these posts will be on my dev2, so dev.to/bweo, and you can catch up when you hear this.
Awesome. So my pick, Brian, is just I don't have a pick, and I'll make my lack of pick but the pick because the reason for that is just I just had my daughter now, and now I'm a father of three. So I have my boy that is 4 years old. I have my other girl who is 1.5. And then my younger now, who is 4 months almost. So like between that and I have time for nothing. Like between the startup and the kids, like I kind of feel like being a father was probably the best thing that ever happened to me ever. Obliterates like anything that my job could ever give me. So like I try to spend all my times with them, but then again, you kind of the funny thing about kids is that you kind of learn a bunch of stuff that by being. I learn all of the kids songs and etc. One thing that's funny is that like I wasn't raised in North America and I wasn't raised in an English speaking country. So I do not know a lot of cultural things that are in the cultural discourse and are used as an expression or references and etc. I had no idea about them at all. And then like watching my kids, I now understand. So the other day was watching Shrek. And watching Shrek now that I understand all the references is very different than watching Shrek when I watched back then, which I did not. I mean, I spoke English, so I was already even living in North America at the time, but I did not get most of the references. I mean, some I've got because I mean, if you've seen Shrek, lots of those like general fairy tale that people would relate from anywhere, but some are very specific, like this guy torturing the gingerbread man and saying the Muffin Man singing the song with the Muffin Man. You might not remember the movie. Like, what does it say? It's like, do you know the Muffin Man? And then the guy said, the Muffin Man who lives in Drury Lane, right? It's just all of those references were being completely missed. Like, I'm essentially living a new childhood with my kids.
Amazing.
That's my pick.
I always I love talking to folks who didn't grow up here, and like I've definitely had a lot of colleagues and coworkers who either still work remote or came to the States, and it's always good to see things through their lens of them understanding, especially.
I'm not in the States though because you guys haven't invaded yet. I'm in Canada, so like.
Okay. Well, so yeah, you did mention North America, so you're.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still, and even like talking to Canadians too as well. It's like there are some nuances and some differences in the culture, and
they're always nuances.
Yeah, so it's always nice to I love that the world, like we have global reach. and like my teammates are in multiple countries, and I'm only just getting started. Like we're still a small team, but the fact that we could do that, like as a brand new company,
and that's why we have a global database, which I just couldn't resist. But
yes, exactly. EcoTurso. Everyone tried it out.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Well, thanks for the conversation,
Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
And folks, if you haven't tried out ChiselStrike or the new Turso product, definitely check it out and keep spreading the jam. That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at Jamstack Radio. This show is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com.